Lazy Jack. Once upon a time there was a boy whose name was Jack, and he lived with his mother on a common. They were very poor, and the old woman got her living by spinning, but Jack was so lazy that he would do nothing but bask in the sun in the hot weather, and sit by the corner of the hearth in the winter time. So they called him Lazy Jack. His mother could not get him to do anything for her, and at last told him one Monday that if he did not begin to work for his porridge, she would turn him out to get his living as he could. This roused Jack, and he went out and hired himself for the next day to a neighbouring farmer for a penny. But as he was coming home, never having had any money before, he lost it in passing over a brook. "You stupid boy," said his mother, "you should have put it in your pocket." "I'll do so another time," replied Jack. On Wednesday, Jack went out again and hired himself to a cowkeeper, who gave him a jar of milk for his day's work. Jack took the jar and put it into the large pocket of his jacket, spilling it all long before he got home. "Dear me," said the old woman, "you should have carried it on your head." "I'll do so another time," said Jack. So on Thursday, Jack hired himself again to a farmer, who agreed to give him a cream cheese for his services. In the evening, Jack took the cheese and went home with it on his head. By the time he got home the cheese was all spoilt, part of it being lost, and part matted with his hair. "You stupid lout," said his mother, "you should have carried it very carefully in your hands." "I'll do so another time," replied Jack. On Friday, Lazy Jack again went out and hired himself to a baker, who would give him nothing for his work but a large tomcat. Jack took the cat and began carrying it very carefully in his hands, but in a short time Pussy scratched him so much that he was compelled to let it go. When he got home his mother said to him, "You silly fellow, you should have tied it with a string and dragged it along after you." "I'll do so another time," said Jack. So on Saturday Jack hired himself to a butcher, who rewarded him by the handsome present of a shoulder of mutton. Jack took the mutton, tied it to a string, and trailed it along after him in the dirt, so that by the time he had got home the meat was completely spoilt. His mother was this time quite out of patience with him, for the next day was Sunday, and she was obliged to make do with cabbage for her dinner. "You ninny hammer," said she to her son, "you should have carried it on your shoulder." "I'll do so another time," replied Jack. On the next Monday, Lazy Jack went once more and hired himself to a cattle keeper, who gave him a donkey for his trouble. Jack found it hard to hoist the donkey on his shoulders, but at last he did it, and began walking slowly home with his prize. Now it happened that in the course of his journey there lived a rich man with his only daughter, a beautiful girl, but deaf and dumb. Now she had never laughed in her life, and the doctors said she would never speak till somebody made her laugh. This young lady happened to be looking out of the window when Jack was passing with the donkey on his shoulders, with the legs sticking up in the air, and the sight was so comical and strange that she burst out into a great fit of laughter, and immediately recovered her speech and hearing. Her father was overjoyed, and fulfilled his promise by marrying her to Lazy Jack, who was thus made a rich gentleman. They lived in a large house, and Jack's mother lived with them in great happiness until she died.
The Pixy Flower. Once upon a time there lived in Devonshire 2 serving damsels called Molly and Sabina, who were very fond of ribbons and finery. When their mistress scolded them for spending more money than they ought upon such things, they said the pixies were very kind to them, and would often drop silver for their pleasure into a bucket of fair water, which they placed for the accommodation of those little beings in the chimney corner every night before they went to bed. Once, however, it was forgotten, and the pixies, finding themselves disappointed by an empty bucket, whisked upstairs to the maid's bedroom, popped through the keyhole, and began to exclaim aloud against the laziness and neglect of the damsels. Now Sabina, who lay awake and heard all this, jogged her fellow servant and proposed getting up immediately to put things straight. But Molly, lazy girl, who liked not being disturbed out of a comfortable nap, pettishly declared that for her part she would not stir out of bed to please all the pixies in Devonshire. The good-humoured Sabina, however, got up, filled the bucket, and was rewarded by a handful of silver pennies found in it the next morning. But long ere that time had arrived, what was her alarm as she crept towards the bed to hear all the elves buzzing like so many angry bees, and consulting as to what should be done to the lazy, lazy lass who would not stir out of bed for their pleasure. Some proposed pinches, nips, and bobs. Others wanted to spoil her new cherry-coloured bonnet and ribbons. One talked of sending her the toothache, another of giving her a red nose. But this last was voted much too bad a punishment for a pretty young lass. So, tempering mercy with justice, the pixies were kind enough to let her off with a lame leg, which was to plague her for 7 years, and was only to be cured by a certain herb growing on Dartmoor. Its long and learned and very queer and difficult name the elven judge pronounced in a high and shrill voice. It was a name of 7 syllables, 7 being also the number of years decreed for Molly's lameness. Sabina, good-natured maid, wished to save her fellow damsel so long a suffering, tried with might and main to bear in mind the name of this strange herb. She said it over and over again, tied a knot in her garter at every syllable as to help to memory, and thought she had the word just as safe and sure as her own name, and very possibly felt much more anxious about retaining the one than the other. At length she dropped asleep, and did not wake until the morning. Now, whether Sabina's head was like a sieve that lets out as fast as it takes in, or if the over-exertion to remember only caused her to forget, cannot be determined. But certain it is that when she opened her eyes, she knew nothing at all about the matter, except that Molly was to go lame on her right leg for 7 long years, unless an herb with a strange name could be got to cure her. And lame Molly went for nearly the whole of those 7 years. At length, about the end of that time, Sabina and Molly went out into the fields early one morning to pick mushrooms, when a merry, squint-eyed, queer-looking boy started up all of a sudden just as Molly went to pluck a fine big one, and came tumbling, head over heels towards her. He held in his hand a green herb with a tiny yellow flower, which some say was called Inula Helenium, and he insisted upon striking Molly with it on the lame leg. From that very moment she got well, and lame Molly became the best dancer in the whole town when she and Sabina danced at the feast of May Day on the green.
The Story of the 3 Bears. Once upon a time there were 3 bears, who lived together in a house of their own in a wood. One of them was a little wee bear, and one was a middle-sized bear, and the other was a great big bear. They had each a bowl for their porridge, a little bowl for the little wee bear, and a middle-sized bowl for the middle-sized bear, and a great bowl for the great big bear. And they had each a chair to sit in, a little chair for the little wee bear, and a middle-sized chair for the middle-sized bear, and a great chair for the great big bear. And they had each a bed to sleep in, a little bed for the little wee bear, and a middle-sized bed for the middle-sized bear, and a great bed for the great big bear. One day, after they had made the porridge for their breakfast, and poured it into their porridge bowls, they walked out into the wood while the porridge was cooling, that they might not burn their mouths by beginning too soon, for they were polite, well-brought-up bears. And while they were away, a little girl called Goldilocks, who lived at the other side of the wood, and had been sent on an errand by her mother, passed by the house and looked in at the window. And then she peeped in at the keyhole, for she was not at all a well-brought-up little girl. Then, seeing nobody in the house, she lifted the latch. The door was not fastened, because the bears were good bears, who did nobody any harm, and never suspected that anybody would harm them. So Goldilocks opened the door and went in, and well pleased was she when she saw the porridge on the table. If she had been a well brought up little girl, she would have waited till the bears came home, and then, perhaps, they would have asked her to breakfast, for they were good bears, a little rough or so, as the manner of bears is, but for all that very good natured and hospitable. But she was an impudent, rude little girl, and so she set about helping herself. First she tasted the porridge of the great big bear, and that was too hot for her. Next she tasted the porridge of the middle-sized bear, but that was too cold for her. And then she went to the porridge of the little wee bear, and tasted it, and that was neither too hot nor too cold, but just right, and she liked it so well that she ate it all up, every bit. Then Goldilocks, who was tired, for she had been catching butterflies instead of running on her errand, sat down in the chair of the great big bear, but that was too hard for her. And then she sat down in the chair of the middle-sized bear, and that was too soft for her. But when she sat down in the chair of the little wee bear, that was neither too hard nor too soft, but just right. So she seated herself in it, and there she sat till the bottom of the chair came out, and down she came, plump upon the ground. And that made her very cross, for she was a bad-tempered little girl. Now, being determined to rest, Goldilocks went upstairs into the bedchamber in which the three bears slept. And first she lay down upon the bed of the great big bear, but that was too high at the head for her. And next she lay down upon the bed of the middle-sized bear, and that was too high at the foot for her. And then she lay down upon the bed of the little wee bear, and that was neither too high at the head nor at the foot, but just right. So she covered herself up comfortably, and lay there till she fell fast asleep. By this time the three bears thought their porridge would be cool enough for them to eat it properly, so they came home to breakfast. Now careless Goldilocks had left the spoon of the great big bear standing in his porridge. "Somebody has been at my porridge," said the great big bear in his great, rough, gruff voice. Then the middle-sized bear looked at his porridge and saw the spoon was standing in it too. "Somebody has been at my porridge," said the middle-sized bear in his middle-sized voice. Then the little wee bear looked at his, and there was the spoon in the porridge bowl, but the porridge was all gone. "Somebody has been at my porridge and has eaten it all up," said the little wee bear in his little wee voice. Upon this the three bears, seeing that some one had entered their house and eaten up the little wee bear's breakfast, began to look about them. Now, the careless Goldilocks had not put the hard cushion straight when she rose from the chair of the great big bear. "Somebody has been sitting in my chair," said the great big bear in his great, rough, gruff voice. And the careless Goldilocks had squatted down the soft cushion of the middle-sized bear. "Somebody has been sitting in my chair," said the middle-sized bear in his middle-sized voice. "Somebody has been sitting in my chair and has sat the bottom through," said the little wee bear in his little wee voice. Then the three bears thought they had better make further search in case it was a burglar, so they went upstairs into their bedchamber. Now Goldilocks had pulled the pillow of the great bear out of its place. "Somebody has been lying in my bed," said the great big bear in his great, rough, gruff voice. And Goldilocks had pulled the bolster of the middle-sized bear out of its place. "Somebody has been lying in my bed," said the middle-sized bear in his middle-sized voice. But when the little wee bear came to look at his bed, there was the bolster in its place, and the pillow was in its place upon the bolster, and upon the pillow there was Goldilocks' yellow head, which was not in its place, for she had no business there. "Somebody has been lying in my bed, and here she is still," said the little wee bear in his little wee voice. Now Goldilocks had heard in her sleep the great, rough, gruff voice of the great big bear, but she was so fast asleep that it was no more to her than the roaring of wind, or the rumbling of thunder, and she had heard the middle-sized voice of the middle-sized bear, but it was only as if she had heard someone speaking in a dream. But when she heard the little wee voice of the little wee bear, it was so sharp and so shrill that it wakened her at once. Up she started, and when she saw the three bears on one side of the bed, she tumbled herself out at the other, and ran to the window. Now the window was open, because the bears, like good tidy bears as they were, always opened their bedchamber window when they got up in the morning. So naughty, frightened little Goldilocks jumped, and whether she broke her neck in the fall, or ran into the wood and was lost there, or found her way out of the wood and got whipped for being a bad girl and playing truant, no one can say. But the three bears never saw anything more of her.
The Blinded Giant. At Dalton, near Thirsk, in Yorkshire, there is a mill. It has quite recently been rebuilt, but when I was at Dalton 6 years ago, the old building stood. In front of the house was a long mound, which went by the name of the Giant's Grave, and in the mill you can see a long blade of iron, something like a scythe blade, but not curved, which was called the Giant's Knife, because of a very curious story which is told of this knife. Would you like to hear it? Well, it isn't very long. There once lived a giant at this mill who had only one eye in the middle of his forehead, and he ground men's bones to make his bread. One day he captured on Pillmore a lad named Jack, and instead of grinding him in the mill, he kept him grinding as his servant, and never let him get away. Jack served the giant 7 years, and never was allowed a holiday the whole time. At last he could bear it no longer. Topcliffe Fair was coming on, and Jack begged that he might be allowed to go there.
"No, no,"
said the giant.
"stop at home and mind your grinding."
"I've been grinding and grinding these 7 years," said Jack, "and not a holiday have I had. I'll have one now, whatever you say."
"We'll see about that,"
said the giant. Well, the day was hot, and after dinner the giant lay down in the mill with his head on a sack and dozed. He had been eating in the mill, and had laid down a great loaf of bone bread by his side, and the knife I told you about was in his hand, but his fingers relaxed their hold of it in sleep. Jack seized the knife, and holding it with both hands, drove the blade into the single eye of the giant, who woke with a howl of agony, and starting up, barred the door. Jack was again in difficulties, for he couldn't get out, but he soon found a way out of them. The giant had a favorite dog, which had also been sleeping when his master was blinded, so Jack killed the dog, skinned it, and threw the hide over his back.
"Bow wow,"
says Jack.
"At him, Truncheon,"
said the giant.
"at the little wretch that I have fed these 7 years, and now has blinded me."
"Bow wow," says Jack, and ran between the giant's legs on all fours, barking till he got to the door. He unlatched it and was off, and never more was seen at Dalton Mill.
Robin Goodfellow. Once upon a time, a great while ago, when men did eat and drink less, and were more honest, and knew no knavery, there was wont to walk many harmless spirits called fairies, dancing in brave orders in fairy rings on green hills with sweet music. Sometimes they were invisible, and sometimes took diverse shapes. Many mad pranks would they play, as pinching of untidy damsels black and blue, and misplacing things in ill-ordered houses. But lovingly would they use good girls, giving them silver and other pretty toys, which they would leave for them, sometimes in their shoes, other times in their pockets, sometimes in bright basins and other clean vessels. Now it chanced that in those happy days a babe was born, in a house to which the fairies did like well to repair. This babe was a boy, and the fairies, to show their pleasure, brought many pretty things thither, coverlets and delicate linen for his cradle, and capons, woodcock, and quail for the christening, at which there was so much good cheer that the clerk had almost forgot to say the babe's name, Robin Goodfellow. So much for the birth and christening of little Robin. When Robin was grown to 6 years of age, he was so knavish that all the neighbors did complain of him, for no sooner was his mother's back turned, but he was in one knavish action or another, so that his mother was constrained, to avoid the complaints, to take him with her to market or wheresoever she went or rode. But this helped little or nothing, for if he rode before her, then he would make mouths and ill-favored faces at those he met. If he rode behind her, then he would clap his hand on the tail, so that his mother was weary of the many complaints that came against him. Yet knew she not how to beat him justly for it, because she never saw him do that which was worthy blows. The complaints were daily so renewed that his mother promised him a whipping. Robin did not like that cheer, and therefore, to avoid it, he ran away, and left his mother a-sorrowing for him. After Robin had travelled a good day's journey from his mother's house, he sat down, and being weary he fell asleep. No sooner had slumber closed his eyelids, but he thought he saw many goodly proper little personages in antic measures tripping about him, and withal he heard such music, and he thought that Orpheus, that famous Greek fiddler, had he been alive, compared to one of these, had been but a poor musician. As delights commonly last not long, so did those end sooner than Robin would willingly they should have done, and for very grief he awakened, and found by him lying a scroll, wherein was written these lines, following in golden letters: Robin, my only son and heir, how to live take thou no care. By nature thou hast cunning shifts, which I'll increase with other gifts. Wish what thou wilt, thou shalt it have. And for to fetch both fool and knave, thou hast the power to change thy shape, to horse, to hog, to dog, to ape. Transformed thus by any means, see none thou harm'st but knaves and queens, but love thou those that can honest be, and help them in necessity. Do thus, and all the world shall know the pranks of Robin Goodfellow, for by that name thou shalt called be to age's last posterity. And if thou keep my just command, one day thou shalt see fairyland. Robin, having read this, was very joyful, yet longed he to know whether he had the power or not, and to try it he wished for some meat. Presently a fine dish of roast veal was before him. Then wished he for plum pudding. He straightway had it. This liked him well, and because he was weary, he wished himself a horse. No sooner was his wish ended, but he was changed into as fine a nag as you need see, and leapt and curveyed and nimbly as if he had been in a stable at rack and manger a full month. Then he wished himself a black dog, and he was so. Then a green tree, and he was so. So from one thing to another, till he was quite sure that he could change himself to anything whatsoever he liked. Thereupon, full of delight at his new powers, Robin Goodfellow set out, eager to put them to the test. As he was crossing a field, he met with a red-faced carter's clown, and called to him to stop. "Friend," quoth he, "what is a clock?" "A thing," answered the clown, "that shows the time of day." "Why then," said Robin Goodfellow, "be thou a clock, and tell me what time of the day it is." "I owe thee not so much service," answered the clown again, "but because thou shalt think thyself beholden to me, know that it is the same time of the day as it was yesterday at this time." These shrewd answers vexed Robin Goodfellow, so that in himself he vowed to be revenged of the clown, which he did in this manner. Robin Goodfellow turned himself into a bird, and followed this fellow, who was going into a field a little from that place to catch a horse that was at grass. The horse, being wild, ran over dike and hedge, and the fellow after, but to little purpose, for the horse was too swift for him. Robin was glad for this occasion, for now or never was the time to have his revenge. Presently Robin shaped himself exactly like the horse that the clown followed, and so stood right before him. Then the clown took hold of the horse's mane and got on his back, but he had not ridden far when, with a stumble, Robin hurled his rider over his head, so that he almost broke his neck. But then again he stood still, and let the clown mount him once more. By the way which the clown now would ride was a great pond of water of a good depth, which covered the road. No sooner did he ride into the very middle of the pond than Robin Goodfellow turned himself into a fish, and so left him with nothing but the pack saddle on which he was riding betwixt his legs. Meanwhile the fish swiftly swam to the bank, and then Robin, changed to a naughty boy again, ran away laughing, ha, 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 leaving the poor clown half drowned and covered with mud. As Robin took his way along the green-hedged side, he fell to singing. And can the doctor make sick men well? And can the gypsy a fortune tell? Without lily, germander, or cockle shell, with sweet briar and bonfire and strawberry wine and columbine. And when he had sung this over, he fell to wondering what he should next turn himself into. Then, as he saw the smoke rise from the chimneys of the next town, he thought to himself, it would be to him great sport to walk the streets with a broom on his shoulder and cry, "Chimney sweep!" But when presently Robin did this, and one did call him, then did Robin run away laughing, ha, ha, ha. Next he set about to counterfeit a lame beggar, begging very pitifully. But when a stout chandler came out of his shop to give Robin an alms, again he skipped off nimbly, laughing as his naughty manner was. That same night he did knock at many men's doors, and when the servants came out, he blew out their candle, and straightway vanished in the dark street with his ha, ha, ha. All these mirthful tricks did Robin play, that day and night, and in these humours of his he had many pretty songs, one of which I will sing as perfect as I can. He sang it in his chimney-sweeper's humour at the tune of I have been a fiddler these 15 years. Black I am from head to foot, and all doth come by chimney soot. Then maidens come and cherish him that makes your chimneys neat and trim. But it befell that, on the very next night of his playing the chimney sweep, Robin had a summons from the land where there are no chimneys. For King Oberon, seeing Robin Goodfellow do so many merry tricks, called him out of his bed with these words, saying, Robin, my son, come quickly rise. First stretch, then yawn, and rub your eyes, for thou must go with me tonight and taste of fairyland's delight. Robin, hearing this, rose and went to him. There were with King Oberon many fairies, all attired in green. All these, with King Oberon, did welcome Robin Goodfellow into their company. Oberon took Robin by the hand and led him in a fair dance. Their musician had an excellent bagpipe made of a wren's quill and the skin of a Greenland fly. This pipe was so shrill and so sweet that a Scottish pipe compared to it, it would no more come near it than a Jew's harp doth to an Irish harp. As they had danced, King Oberon said to Robin, Whene'er you hear the piper blow, round and round the fairies go, and nightly you must with us dance in meadows where the moonbeams glance, and make the circle hand in hand. That is the law of fairyland, where thou shalt see what no man knows, while sleep the eyes of men doth close. So marched they, with their piper before, to the fairyland. There did King Oberon show Robin Goodfellow many secrets, which he never did open to the world, and there in fairyland doth Robin Goodfellow abide now, this many a long year.